أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وبه نستعين إنه خير ناصر ومعين ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار، ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين والتسعة المعصومين من ذرية الحسين، واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم أجمعين من الآن إلى يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم: إنما وليكم الله ورسوله والذين آمنوا الذين يقيمون الصلاة ويؤتون الزكاة وهم راكعون ومن يتولى الله ورسوله والذين آمنوا فإن حزب الله هم الغالبون. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. Respected Maulana, dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So far in our discussion in the past few nights, we have been talking a little bit about this concept of wilaya that is so central to our religion, not just to the Shia of the Ahlul Bayt, but to Islam in general. And last night mentioned a hadith from our fifth Imam, Imam Muhammad al-Baqir alayhi salam, where the Imam says that Islam is built upon 5 things. بُنِيَ الْإِسْلَامُ عَلَى خَمْسٍ عَلَى الصَّلَاةِ وَالزَّكَاةِ وَالصَّوْمِ وَالْحَجِّ وَالْوَلَايَةِ. That Islam is based upon 5 things. It is founded, and the pillars of Islam are 5 things. There is salat, zakat, saum, hajj, and wilaya. وَمَا يُنَادَى بِشَيْءٍ كَمَا نُودِيَ بِالْوِلَايَةِ. That there is nothing that has been commanded to by Allah as has been commanded to regarding wilaya. That wilaya is the most central of these various pillars. And so talked about the significance of wilaya and as well what wilaya means. That wilaya in its essence refers to an intimate connection that we have towards someone else or something else. And that intimate connection has certain characteristics. The first of those characteristics being how much we can move beyond ourselves and our own wants and needs, and how much we can think about the wants and the needs of the opposite person or the opposite thing. So for example, a father who truly loves his son, a mother who truly loves her daughter, she will be able to look beyond herself and her own wants and needs and think about the needs of her child. That's the first characteristic. The second characteristic is this process of growth, that whenever we get into an intimate connection or a relationship with someone, we start off at a certain point and then we slowly grow into that relationship such that we are able to move beyond ourselves, which our connection requires us to do. And there was the story of Nabi Adam and his connection to Allah, where in the beginning, Nabi Adam makes a mistake. And Allah, through his mistake, through his misstep, that mistake that was inspired to him by Iblis, Nabi Adam, through that mistake, is able to grow and get a closer connection to Allah, such that Allah is able to teach Nabi Adam the means to which that he can come closer to Allah. So Allah in the Quran says, "Talaqa Adam min kalimatin," that Allah brings and gives Adam certain words and certain phrases that he is able, through which Nabi Adam is able to ask for forgiveness and get closer to Allah. And then Allah says, وَتَابَ إِلَيْهِ وَإِنَّهُ تَوَّابٌ التَّوَّابُ الرَّحِيمُ, that Allah, Nabi Adam turns towards Allah and then Allah turns towards him. And the connection between Nabi Adam and Allah becomes ever greater and the bond becomes ever stronger. And so it's this process of growth that initially when we come into this intimate connection, we might not have that strength, that relationship, but then over time we're able to move beyond ourselves and we're able to think about the other person. So that's the second characteristic. The third characteristic is that it's through this process that we're able to transform ourselves and the things around us. So, now that we maybe have a better understanding of what wilaya is all about, how to define it and how to understand it in terms of an intimate connection that we have towards some person or some being, now we can look towards what Allah calls us to have this wilaya towards. Who should we be intimately connected with? In this ayah of Surah Al-Ma'idah, where Allah defines for us what wilaya is, and He tells us who we should be connected to, Allah begins with Himself. He says, إِنَّمَا وَلِيُّكُمْ Allah. The first being, the first opposite side that you have to have this connection with, the first connection that you have to have is with Allah. Allah begins with Himself. And the question is, well, why is that even important? Why should we have a connection with Allah? In our society, a lot of times people ask, well, what's the whole point of religion? Why should we even have religion? Why should we even think about God? And, in the end of the day, if we look in our society, we have Christians, we have Jews, we have Muslims, we have atheists, we have agnostics, we have people of varying beliefs. And each person believes what they believe, and each person does what they do. Some people are good, some people are bad. Some people maybe follow their religion, and some people don't. But we see that a lot of times when we speak to, say for example, atheists or people who don't have any religion, they say, well, you people who are religious, what do you guys have that we don't? We also give to charity. We also do good things throughout the world. We give our time and give our money towards creating a better world. Right? And we understand, a lot of times in our society, we understand religion simply in terms of making better people who can help society more. Who can help society more? Who is a better person, a more moral person? And we see that maybe even sometimes people who don't have any religion, they are more charitable than, say for example, Muslims or religious people. Maybe even sometimes they're even more moral and they do better things and more good throughout the world. Right? So what's the point? Why should we even discuss all of these things? Why should we have this wilaya, this intimate connection with Allah? What does it give us? What does it do for us? And so sometimes we see that, for example, some people will say that you guys have your religion and you keep your religion and it's good for you, and I have my religion and I'll keep my religion and my beliefs. whatever they might be. You can impose your religion on me, and I can impose my religion on you. And so what happens is that we have this sense of full relativism in our society, that there is really no ultimate truth. The only truth is how good you are and how much you do good to the people around you. So we see that in our society, truth they usually say truth with a capital T, doesn't really exist. And we actually don't see it alive in our lives, right? We don't see, a lot of people don't necessarily, maybe not see God present in their lives. So for example, some people, religious people will, come to the church once a week, or maybe they will come to the masjid once a week, and then they'll go home and they don't actually see God active in their lives. They don't really see God's presence in their lives. And so they might ask themselves, well, what's the whole point? Right? Why should we care? But Allah says that your first connection, that most important connection that you have, should be towards me. And maybe one reason this is, maybe one reason Allah sets that first and most important connection to Himself is so that Allah can give us a sense of what it means to be religious. Saying that your connection to me is the most important connection that you can possibly have. Your wilayah to me is the most important and central connection of your entire being. When we look in the Quran, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When we look in the Quran describes wilayah in two different types. There are two different main categories of wilayah. One is a wilayah that we choose. So for example, somebody chooses their religion, they say they're Christian, they choose that intimate connection to Jesus and Nabi Isa alayhi salam. Now other people may choose a different religion. And then there's a second type of wilayah that the Quran talks about. This second type, Allah does not give us a choice about. He says, your wilayah to me, this second type of wilayah, this intimate connection that you have to me, it is not your choice. Such that on the day of judgment, Allah tells the kuffar, who is going to be your wali today, except for me? The kuffar, who didn't believe in God in this world, who chose to disbelieve in God. Allah says, who is going to be your wali except for me? Meaning what? Meaning that this wilayah was not your decision. This type of wilayah was not your decision. So we see that there's two types of wilayah. One which is our choice. A second type of wilayah which is not something that we have chosen. God connects Himself in this very intimate way. He has this relationship with us that we did not choose. And that is a relationship of creation and sustenance. And we kind of have this, an example in our own lives when, for example, a mother gives birth to her child, a father brings a child into this world, and he sustains that child. And he gives food and water and clothing and, puts a roof over the child's head. Did the child decide that, for example, you're going to be my father or you're going to be my mother? Was that a decision that they make? Did they actually have any connection to those parents? Well, no. However difficult it might be, we don't choose our children. And however difficult it might be, we don't choose our parents, regardless of whether we like it or not. That's a decision that has been made for us. And so what Allah is saying in these verses is that your relationship to me starts from me, not from you. Your connection to me starts from my choosing, not yours. And so Allah, in multiple parts of the Quran, talks about this most central aspect of our wilayah to Allah, where He says, I create you and I sustain you. And for example, in Surah Al-Baqarah, Allah says, أَلَمْ تَعْلَمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ لَهُ مُلْكُ السَّمَاوَاتِ وَالْأَرْضِ وَمَا لَكُم مِّن دُونِ اللَّهِ مِّن وَلِيٍّ وَلَا نَصِيرٍ. That do you not know that Allah is the one who created the heavens and the earth? And do you not know that there is no one who is your wali and your aid and your assistance except for Allah? So there is no one that we can sort of point to in creation except for Allah. Why is this important? Why is this relevant for our religious lives? If we look at, for example, in our society, if we look at who is the ultimate authority for knowledge? For example, who are the types of people that if we go to, then we will be able to say that these people are telling us about, say, for example, the world and how the world works. And if, say, for example, somebody was to deny what they said, then it would be unreasonable. If you look at science in our culture, in this country, if, say, for example, a scientist or a scientific community says that climate change is a reality, right? And everybody, all of the scientists around the world agree, or say, for example, a majority of them agree, that climate change is a reality. If somebody were to come and deny that and to debate that, we would say that what? We would say either they have some sort of agenda, or they have they're ignorant of what the scientific community says, or maybe they're unreasonable. Right? That's generally what our culture would say. That's generally what people would say about science and scientists. Or for example, a doctor. If a doctor comes and tells us that this is the medicine that's going to cure your illness, whatever it might be. And we say, no, I'm not going to accept that. I'm going to take this other medication. The doctor is saying, no, this is the only medication that's going to save you from this illness. And we say, no, I think I know better. I have no experience or training in medicine, but I'm sure, the doctors among us may have that experience. But, it kind of, when you experience that, or when you have that reaction, people understand that as being unreasonable. Because the doctor is telling you what the reality is. The scientist is telling you what reality is like. He's saying that this is how the material world works. There is carbon emissions, and through those carbon emissions, there's this process that takes place, and so on and so forth. And then the result is climate change. And we see that this is a reality for our material world. But when we look at the Quran, we see that the Quran also explains our material world for us. In numerous ayat of the Quran says that this, for example, is how rain works. That Allah creates and He brings the rain down to the earth. And then the vegetation grows, and then all of a sudden you see that the world is full of life and full of greenness and vegetation. And Allah, though, is not explaining for us the material world as a scientist would. A lot of times we might experience or read these verses and think, wow, mashallah, look, Allah is saying, Allah is telling us how the world was, and science is only now coming to understand how the world actually works. Right? We have these, for example, sometimes people make videos and so on. But look, Allah is saying He created the world in, say, 6 days, or He told us how the embryo works, how the embryo develops in the womb, and look how great Allah's miracle is, right? And we take pride in that. The fact that Allah is telling us how the world works before science could discover it. But it seems that the Quran doesn't quite fit that model. When we look at the verses themselves, Allah isn't just telling us how the material world works. In fact, when Allah is talking about the material world, He's not pointing to the material world in and of itself. He's not saying, for example, that the water cycle goes like this. This is, for example, water will evaporate and then it will condensate in the atmosphere, and look how the atmosphere was created, and then all of a sudden, when certain changes occur in the temperature or in the weather, then the water will descend to the ground. That's not the way that the Quran explains it. In verse after verse, Allah explains it in a very particular way. So, first of all, Allah, for example, says, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ وَفِي أَنفُسِهِمْ حَتَّى يَتَبَيَّنَ لَهُمْ أَنَّهُ الْحَقِّ. We will show them our signs in the heavens and in themselves. Why? So that they know that this is the truth. So that they know that He is the truth. It's not so that Allah is giving us a science lesson in the Quran. That's not the whole point. If we understand the Quran and we read the Quran in terms of a science lesson, we've missed the entire point. What the Quran is saying is that we're going to show you all of these signs so that you are pointed to the purpose of creation. And the purpose of creation cannot be found in the material world. The purpose of creation is for you to move beyond the material world. For you to see why God has created this world. For you to see why there is a moral creation that goes beyond this material world. For you to see that there is a spiritual realm that you have to move towards. You have to grow towards. All of these signs are for us to move closer to Allah. It's kind of like when, say for example, the local government decides to, build a new road. And they, pave the road and they do all of the things that they need to do. The civil engineers among us could be able to explain this much better. But if for example, they pave the road and then they put this very beautiful sign up saying this is, for example, route number, 105, whatever it is, from Richmond to DC. And then some of the commuters, they are trying to get to DC, and then all of a sudden you see one person, he is really moved by the sign. Wow, look at how the sign looks. Look at the green and then the white contrast, and look how the curves are made, and look how beautiful and it reflects light and all of this stuff. And then he just stares at the sign for God knows how long. If we look at that person, we would say that that person is quite unreasonable. Maybe he doesn't understand what the point of a sign is. He's being distracted by the sign. Instead of going to his destination, he is distracted by the sign and he's looking towards something else. He's lost his purpose. What Allah is trying to tell us in these verses is not that once you see the material world, you are distracted by it, but rather that you should look to the purpose of creation. You should look to why God has created it, why God has created the world. And it is that purpose that this entire world has been created. It's for that purpose. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And we see that in reality in the Quran, many of the times that the Quran speaks to the kuffar, in fact, the Quran isn't telling them that you should believe in one God. Many of the kuffar already have this innate and deep understanding that there is a God and there is a creator. But they decide to forget it. They decide to be distracted by certain things in the world. So the first relationship, the first connection that we have to God is in terms of His creating us and His setting this entire world in order. That's the first type of wilayah that Allah has towards us. A second type of wilayah is in terms of Allah sustaining us. Allah constantly being connected to us. And this is what this is one of the reasons why religion is so important. Not only that religion tells us that there is a world beyond this world. And it gives us, in fact, a map for what this other world is like, this moral and spiritual world. And it gives us the direction that we have to go to. Not only that, and it tells us, in fact, that this other world is true, and it's a reality, and it's a fact. Just like how we have scientific facts, this other world is a fact and it's a reality, regardless of whether we want to accept it or not. Religion also tells us that not only did God create this world, but as well He sustains it. And He is there in every moment of our lives. So in time and time again, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allah shows the traces of His effects throughout the world. He says, look at the way I have raised you from when you were just a little child. Look at the way I sustain you throughout your entire life. When we think about, for example, that story of Nabi Adam. Nabi Adam, if you can imagine Nabi Adam's story almost like a metaphor for all of creation, for all of humankind. Look at how God creates Nabi Adam, and then He feeds him, and He clothes him, and He sustains him, and then He also teaches him, and He raises him. Right? If our children came tomorrow and said, for example, I want my freedom and I want to be emancipated and so on and so forth, we'd say, fine, give us all of the things that we gave to you back, all that food and time and clothing and all of that stuff. It's not just that we brought you into this world, but we've been sustaining you this entire time. And Allah, time and time again in the Quran says, we didn't just create you and leave you be, we have sustained you. And in fact, time and time again, the Quran tells us that all of the causes and the effects in this world, not only did God create the system and the water cycle and the systems that we see in the world, but Allah is the one who puts these things intact. For example, when we look at the water cycle, we see that there are different parts. There's the water, and then there's the sun, and then there's the atmosphere. All of these different causes come together to create the water cycle, right? What the Quran tells us is that, in fact, Allah is present not just in creating the world, but in bringing all of these different causes together. So in a very profound ayah of the Quran in Surah Al-Sajdah, Allah explains how this works. Surah Al-Sajdah is actually the context behind Surah Al-Sajdah is that Allah is explaining to the people of Mecca, these polytheists, that not only did God create you, but He is there in every step of the way. The polytheists of Mecca, they believed in God. They actually believed in Allah. And apparently, according to reports, they even believed that God created the world. But what happened is that, according to their belief, Allah gave His power of sustaining the world and keeping the world intact to certain gods that they would worship. For example, these idols that they would worship, they represented gods that would, for example, one god would sustain the water, another god would sustain, for example, fertility, another god would sustain, thunder and the skies and so on and so forth. So for those who are familiar with, for example, Greek mythology or Roman mythology, it's kind of in that same vein. That God created the world, that there was a creator, and then for the beings who sustain the world, who keep the world in order, these are other gods. And what the Quran says is that don't think this is how Allah works. Allah does not relegate or delegate His interaction with the world to other beings. And this is the beginning context of Surah Al-Sajdah. So Allah in Surah Al-Sajdah, He says in ayah number 4, He says, أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم الله الذي خلق السماوات والأرض وما بينهما في 6 أيام ثم استوى على العرش وما لكم من دونه من ولي ولا شفيع أفلا تتذكرون. Allah is the one who created the heavens and the earth and whatever is in between them in 6 days. And then Allah says, He established Himself on the throne. وَمَا لَكُم مِّن دُونِهِ مِن وَلِيٍّ وَلَا شَفِيعٍ. And there is no wali for you. There's no one who is more intimately connected to you than Allah. And there's no one who is an intercessor for you, an intermediary for you, a shafi' for you other than Allah. And what some of the mufassirun say in explaining this verse is that this shafa'ah that Allah has is not just in the Day of Judgment. In fact, the shafa'ah that Allah does, this intercession that Allah does, is in this very world. When we see, for example, the rain and all of the different things that come together to produce rain, Allah is the one who decides how these processes work. Allah is the one who will make the water evaporate, and for the water to evaporate, Allah is the one who will shine the sun onto the water. Allah is the one who will cause the water to condensate and to rise up and then to condensate in the heavens. And Allah is the one who will make the rain fall. Allah, you can find, if you are able to see how the world actually works, you should be able to see the traces of Allah throughout all of creation. And in fact, when we look in Islamic history, when we look in Islamic civilization, we see that this is how Muslims understood. When they were looking at science and they were advancing the sciences, we see that, in fact, Muslims were the first to discover many of the scientific facts that we have today. For example, how the eye works. The discoveries of how the eye works were first discovered by a Muslim scientist. But the difference between how science worked in the Islamic civilization and the way that science works nowadays is Muslim scientists were able to see these traces of Allah's work throughout all of creation, so that science became actually a means for them to get closer to Allah. Their discovery of the world, because they understood that entire creation, the moral and the spiritual world, and the material world being a means for us to get closer to Allah, they were able to look at the world and discover how the world works and use that as a means for them to get closer to Allah. And so we see that actually some of the best and greatest scientists in the Islamic world were some of the greatest believers, the greatest Muslims they were great theologians and they were great philosophers. And these same people were also scientists. Through understanding how the world works, they were able to get closer to Allah. And what this knowledge gave them was not just a better understanding of the world, but they had a certain sense of confidence, a certain confidence that a lot of times in our society we don't see the same confidence in religious communities. That we know what the truth is. We know how the world works. And I am confident because I know how the world works and I see God's traces in everything around me. The more I understand the world, the more I see God in everything in the world, and the more I'm confident that Allah is the one who sets things in order. And for example, if some tragedy occurs in my life, if some calamity occurs in my life, I know that Allah is there watching over me. And I know that God will make things right. And I am not worried anymore that who is going to come and take the injustice out of my life. And so we see example after example in the lives of the Ahlul Bayt of this very confidence. For example, before the coming of the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad al-Mustafa sallallahu alaihi wa we see that his grandfather, Abdul Muttalib, the famous story of Ashabul Fil, where this huge army of Abraha comes to Mecca to destroy the Kaaba. And you're all very familiar with this story, where he gathers this king from the south, he gathers this entire army, the greatest army that was seen on the Arabian Peninsula. They come towards Mecca to destroy specifically the Kaaba. And as you all know, Abdul Muttalib was the key holder to the Kaaba. He was responsible for giving security to the Kaaba. He was the chief of Mecca, and people looked to him for safety and security. And so when this king, Abraha, comes to Mecca, he comes with this huge army, right? So imagine this, elephants and horses and hordes of men. This huge, huge army. They're coming towards the Mecca slowly, and then all of a sudden they see that Abdul Muttalib is coming towards Abraha, either alone or with a few men, and he is coming closer and closer, and this king asks them, well, what do you want? What is it that I can give you? He thinks that, Abdul Muttalib is coming to maybe ask for some mercy for his people. Maybe he wants to come and make a deal, right? Abdul Muttalib comes to this king and he says, your men have killed some of my camels, and I want you to give me my camels back. They have made my camels run away, and I want you to compensate me for that. This king is surprised. He says, I'm coming to destroy your city. I'm coming to destroy your Kaaba. And you, as the chief of this city, you are coming to me to ask me for some camels? That's a strange deal. That's a strange interaction. Why would you come to me to ask me for some camels? You should ask me for some refuge and some safety. And what Abdul Muttalib says is interesting. He says, I know that Kaaba has its own Lord. That Kaaba has a person, a being who is looking after it. I'm the owner of these camels. That Kaaba has its own owner. I have to take care of what is mine. And so I am here to ask you for the things that you have taken from me. See this confidence that I am telling the truth. I know what the truth is. Whatever you might do, whatever evil or injustice you might bring, I know the world is going to come and be rightened. And we see the same confidence in the Ahlul Bayt when they are approaching Karbala. And after the events of Karbala, Lady Zainab, salamullah alayha, sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Send the loudest salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Lady Zainab, after the events of Karbala, when the women and the children are paraded throughout the city and they are taken to Kufa in the court of Ubaydullah, Ubaydullah is trying to taunt the Ahlul Bayt, the women and the children. And he's trying to get them to maybe ask for some mercy or maybe try to disrespect them and dishonor them more than he already has. And he asks Lady Zainab, how do you see what Allah has done to you? How do you understand and perceive what Allah has done to you and to your Ahlul Bayt and to your brother? So he's not blaming himself and his own actions, but he is placing the blame on Allah. This is what Allah has done to you. And what Lady Zainab says is profound. She says, "Ma ra'aytu illa jamila." I don't see anything but beauty in the way Allah has created His creation and what Allah has done. I don't see anything but beauty in the order that Allah has created. Not just in this world, but in the moral order that Allah has created. I don't see anything but beauty, because I know Allah's creation and Allah's order was only so that your ugliness and your evil can shine through. And so that the goodness and the righteousness of the Ahlul Bayt can shine through. I knew that Imam Hussein and I knew that the Ahlul Bayt were going through this struggle. We knew from far before. In fact, the Prophet of Allah had told us himself. So we are not moved by these acts and by this tragedy. We have this confidence. We know that Allah is watching. And He will bring justice to us. And He will bring justice to you. Lady Zainab says, "Ma ra'aytu illa jamila." I don't see anything but beauty in this creation that Allah has created. And we see that the same confidence is in the Ahlul Bayt of Imam Hussein as he is getting closer to Karbala. It is on the 8th of Dhul Hijjah that the caravans depart from Mecca. And Imam Hussein, having heard that Kufa was behind him and will support him, Imam Hussein gathers the caravan and departs for Kufa. And they are on their way, and in their way, on their journey, they hear that Muslim ibn Aqil has been killed. And he has reached his demise in Kufa. And that the people of Kufa have become disloyal. And Imam Hussein, when he hears this news, he begins to cry. He begins to cry for his close companion Muslim. And then the caravan, as they're moving towards Kufa, at one point the caravan stops, Imam Hussein stops, and Lady Zainab says that, "Ya Aba Abdullah, ever since the caravan stopped in this area, my heart has been moving and my heart is unsteady. I feel a certain sadness come upon me. I feel a certain grief upon me." Imam Hussein looks to the people of that area and he asks them, "What is this place called? Where are we? What do you call this place?" They respond, "This place has many names. Sometimes it is called At-Taf." Imam Hussein says, "No. Is there another name for this place?" "Sometimes it's called Ghaziriya." "No. Is there another name?" "Sometimes it's called Nainawa." "Is there another name?" "Sometimes it's called Karbala." The caravan has come to the land of Karbala. Imam Hussein says, "Allahumma a'udhu bika min al-karbi wal-bala." "Oh Allah, I seek refuge in you from tragedy and sadness, from calamity that is going to fall upon us. Oh Allah." Imam Hussein looks to the different parts. It is reported that Imam Hussein points to one part of that land and he says, "This is where our blood is going to be spilled. And this is where the bodies are going to lie. And this is where we are going to be left all alone. And this is where we are going to be placed in the ground." And Lady Zainab, when she hears this, she says, "Ya Aba Abdullah." It is reported, she tells him,
Ya Imam Hussein, these are the words of someone who knows and is certain that he is going to die. Imam Hussein says, yes, we will be killed in this land. Imam Hussein tells them to set up the tents. Lady Zainab looks to him and she says, Ya Aba Abdullah, what will we do after you are gone? You may be killed, but what will the women do and what will the children do after you are gone? Ya Aba Abdullah. Wa Madluma, Wa Husayna. What will the women do and the children do after their support has been vanished? What will they do after their imam has been killed? وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.